Welcome REC Foundation VEX Robotics community to our mid-season town hall. My name is Dan Mance. I'm the CEO of the Robotics Education and Competition Foundation, and we're here to talk about some of the highlights of the 2021-2022 competition season, and also some preview of 2022-2023. A lot of focus today will be on VEX Worlds. That's what you guys want to know about. Last town hall, it was all me all the time, and I think that was a little boring. So we're very fortunate right now that Lisa Schultz, VP of Programs, and Grant Cox, lead of the GDC, are both joining us. They'll be here to present some slides as well as also answer Q&A. So thank you so much for the Q&A, the pre-advanced Q&A. It was really interesting this time, to be honest with you. We had most of the questions were concentrated into a couple subject areas. So we definitely know what you guys want to learn about, and we've actually got slides to try to answer those questions the best that we can. And as time permits, we'll try to answer additional questions. So let's get started. What we're going to talk about today briefly is some highlights from this season. Again, VEX Worlds, next season, the VIQC game changes. That was a really big topic, and I think the GDC led by Grant has come up with a good resolution. A little bit about qualifying criteria, in particular VEX Worlds and LRT, and then a lot of information from Lisa on LRT. So just some quick highlights. As everyone knows, we're coming out of the pandemic. And it was really bad timing because the 2019-2020 season was by far the best season that we had ever had as far as registrations, new programs, growth in the event partners. It was just really, really going strong. And then, you know, March 2020 happened. And as I've said many, many times, and I won't repeat myself, the community really rallied and persevered over the last year and a half, 2 years. So going into this year, we didn't know what it was going to be like. Because let's be honest, you educators out there in particular, we know you're going through some rough times. The educators that are coaches, you students and stuff like that, it has not been an easy ride. So we had tempered enthusiasm of how many people would be able to participate this year. And we made the decision to make sure we had more online challenges and that we continued to support LRT, those type of things. But as of this morning, we have hit over 20,000 teams that have registered. So right now, this would be our fourth highest season ever. I'm very confident that we continue to add teams every week. I'm very confident that within the next few weeks or so, this will be either our third or second largest season ever as far as registered teams. But again, super excited that 20,000 teams from across the globe have registered and are participating. Another thing was how many events. With so many teams, we need to have events. And let's be honest, it kind of got off to a slow start there. It was kind of a chicken and egg, right? So teams want to register, but they didn't see events. Event partners want to host events, but they didn't see teams registered. But we're really, really coming on strong there. It really, right now we have over 2,300 events that have been scheduled, and we're hitting to the bulk of the season, but super excited about that. I think at the peak, pre-COVID, we were about 2,800 events, so probably won't hit that number, but again, it's super strong. And then another metric that I'm really proud of is that the Robotics Education Competition Foundation is not just the US. We are a global organization, and pre-pandemic, we had, I think, 73 registered teams, right? And right now, as of today, I counted over 50 countries that have registered. There's a lot of other countries that aren't registering because of situations in their own country, but they're still doing the VEX program and stuff like that. So I really expect that next year will be will exceed the pre-pandemic numbers. But I'm very, very pleased, and a huge thank you to my staff, the entire Robotics Education and Competition Foundation, for really, really going out of there to support teams. I think it's been absolutely fantastic, the effort they've been in trying to offer flexibility. And so kudos to you. And again, thanks to the coaches that have persevered, the event partners that have come back on board, and all the students. I mean, that's why we're doing this, for you students. So just a quick rehash of the competition options we have this year. So you know about our in-person, live remote, and in-person skills are our primary three. So our in-person one is our most common event. Even this year, coming out of the pandemic, it's by far the most common event we're having this year. And they're typically one-day events that feature qualification matches, skills matches finalized by either an elimination match or in VIQC, it's a cooperation finals, right? And in most cases, these events have judging too. And they're often with the judge interviews. But what was neat about this year, one of the things we learned from the pandemic is the ability to do some pre-judging with remote judging with notebooks, etc. So this is our most common event. But we also maintained LRT. And you guys have heard me talk about LRT. I believe this is a big part of our future. I believe this allows us to hit areas that aren't able to travel, allows us to bring in the international community ever more. They're fun events, they're rural events, and especially what's happened over the last 4 or 5 weeks with the Omicron variant, it's become really, really important again. So LRTs are typically one-day events. You compete from your home or your school or from hallway, or nothing will ever be etched into my mind more than last year with VEX Worlds being LRT and seeing fields set up in libraries and garages and even outside in a tent, right? So we did make a couple changes to LRT, especially in VRC, where instead of 2v2, we went to 1v1. And again, we have qualification matches and finals and elimination matches in LRT. And it's a great option for those that want to compete in an in-person, but an in-person event isn't, available. And again, the reason I wanted to bring this slide up again, even though most of this community knows about LRT, is unfortunately over the last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of events canceled because of the Omicron variant. And instead of like writing off those events, I really encourage the community to consider doing an LRT event. It's really a great way to still, use the design process. That's what we're about, is the learning, the design process, et cetera. So want to make sure that you EPs and you coaches know that that option is available, and make sure that you reach out to your event support manager, your event engagement manager, if this is something that you're interested in. And we'll have a lot more on LRT coming up with Lisa later. In-person skills. This is probably the easiest type of event to run. So for our new event partners, new coaches that you're kind of putting your foot in, or even some new teams, this is always a great option. It's a one-day event. You get to see other teams' designs. You got to test out your robot. And basically you have your skills, your driving skills and your programming skills, and the results are posted. And the nice thing about in-person skills only events is you can have judging. It's not required, but a lot of times these in-person skill events will have judging. So don't forget about this option. It's really a really good entry point for new teams and for new event partners. So it's still there. One of the questions that we received is, hey, we just registered and all our events are full. And a couple EPs said, hey, we know it's past the date for scheduling events, but there's a need in our community. So please reach out to your event engagement manager if you have the capacity to maybe do an event. So one of the things I'm super excited that we've been able to do as the REC Foundation with our partner VEX Robotics, and that's the resources that we've been able to give to our community. And it's changed a little bit too. You can say nothing good came from the pandemic, but I know it forced me and our organization to look at things a different way. And I think between our organization and VEX and other partners, we really found some great avenues to still have STEM programs and still allow students to do robotics, even with some of the limitations they might have in their area. So just a quick reminder, included with the registration is virtual skills, again, for VEX registered teams, mentor PD. So when you register your team, you have access to VEX virtual skills and mentor PD. Again, the competition options. One of my favorite programs is the classroom competition activities. We know we now are doing remote judging and digital notebooks. We have online challenges. Online challenges have closed for this year, but I think the students that do them really, really appreciate it. And it really gives our educators another resource too. One of the questions that we were asked is, can we have the online challenges start earlier, right? Because this teacher in particular likes to use the online challenges when they kind of have some dead space in their build or programming activities. And as always, the REC Foundation has dedicated managers for support. So gotta love our TEMs and EEMs out there. They're some of the greatest individuals ever, right? So that's what your registration fee gets you. The reason I kept this slide is kind of like a little bit of a re-promotion of something that I was super excited that we developed. If you remember the last town hall, and even if you remember the teaser that we did at VEX Worlds, at the live remote VEX Worlds last year, we talked about virtual skills. And this was a great product. We basically went to VEX, and with the pandemic, so many people were doing STEM activities just virtually. And at the REC Foundation, we strongly believe that you need to be hands-on as well, but we don't want to discount the importance of virtual. So we went to VEX Robotics and we said, for our program, we are going back to in-person. We always believe that you will use the design process. You will always build a robot. You'll always program a robot, but there's a place for virtual also. And VEX Robotics and the VEX education team created virtual skills, and they agreed it would be part of our registration. So again, the video here is actually going to show. Good. Just a little quick teaser recap. So, hey, Bill, I lied to you. I am showing a video.
Are you ready to begin planning, strategizing, and coding your robot for the new competition season? Simply register a team and get started with VEX Virtual Skills Coding for the 2021-2022 VEX Robotics Competition and VEX IQ Challenge Games. Experience the fun and excitement of skills challenges while learning computer science with VEX Code VR. You can take advantage of knowledge base articles, lessons, and teacher resources today at vrskills.vex.com.
So you're asking, Dan, why are you talking about virtual skills for the third time? Well, in looking at the data, and I'm a very data-driven person, my nerdy little engineering notebook, my nerdy little glasses, I love looking at data, right? And so I wanted to see how much of the community has been doing virtual skills, especially now that the leaderboard was released last week. And notice that probably only about 10% of VRC teams and only 10% of VEX IQ challenge teams have actually tried virtual skills. And I have access to this resource called the Student Advisory Board and reached out to them just to get their feedback. And some of the Student Advisory Board teams are using it. They use it as an education tool, which is what it was intended, right? We wanted this to be a platform to teach coding and strategy and stuff like that. A couple of people came back and said, oh, we thought this was actually a virtual competition, kind of like a virtual skills, and we wanted to do things physically. And that's not what this was. And then we had some people say that they just didn't get around to using it this year. But so only about 10% of the communities use this tool. And I just wanted to promote it again, because I think it's a really good resource. And I was afraid that maybe in previous messaging, people got confused what this was. So if you haven't checked it out, please do it. It came with your registration. Oops. My mouse is super sensitive today. Probably my favorite topic to talk about today is the 2022 VEX Robotics World Championship, as it has been in the past few years, presented by Northrop Grumman Foundation, as well as the REC Foundation. And it will be held in Dallas, Texas at the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center, May 3rd through 12th, 2022. So the number one question we were asked going into this town hall was, are we having an in-person VEX Robotics World Championship? And it's an emphatic yes. We've been planning this. Matter of fact, my day today, Lisa's day today, has been almost entirely meetings on VEX Worlds planning. Even with the COVID variant, we were still proceeding with having an in-person event. Now, we do understand there are countries and there are even pockets in the US that will not be able to come to the in-person event. And we are going to have an LRT option, and Lisa's going to talk about that a little bit more, but we are having an in-person event. What criteria are we looking about? Well, we're looking at everything that, that's being published. Is there a chance it could get canceled? I would never say never, because we don't know what's going to happen over the next 2 months, but right now it's full steam ahead for an in-person event. We're super excited about it. So that's the number one question I was asked, and yes, it is in person. As a matter of fact, this is an exciting time of the year because we are now having our regional championships, our state championships, our national championships to actually qualify for this event. So some of you asked, how do I qualify for VEX Worlds? And please take a look at the qualifying criteria document or reach out to your EEM or TEM and they'll help you. But we are having it. And matter of fact, VEX Worlds will be bigger than ever this year. It'll be the largest VEX Worlds we've ever had. We've actually changed up the format so we could have any more teams. Once we hit over 30,000 VEX teams competing, the percentage that qualified to our last in-person event was very, very small. So we've actually changed some things up. And I think for the first time in the history of the RECF, we're actually showing a tentative agenda this early. It's something we're usually keep pretty close to our vest, right? We don't like to share this so early because there's always the potential for changes, but our team has really been actively working on this and I feel comfortable sharing this tentative agenda. But as we briefly discussed previously, instead of just 2 events, a VRC event and a VIQC event, we're actually having 4 events. So on Tuesday the 3rd, you can see VRC event 1 will start, and that's for VRC Middle School, JROTC, and VEX-U. We'll have check-ins, skills, opening ceremonies. We'll still have grand opening ceremonies like we always have. Day 2 will be your qualifying matches and skills matches. And then on day 3, the VRC Middle School, JROTC will have continuing their qualification matches. Then they'll have their divisional and overall finals and awards. But while that's happening, the VRC high school teams will be coming in. They'll be checking in, doing inspections, skills runs, and they'll have their opening ceremonies. So literally, we'll be having opening ceremonies for VRC high school and a couple hours later, closing ceremonies for VRC middle school. And then as you can see from the calendar, Friday and Saturday are the VRC events. And then on Sunday, May 8th, it starts again. So it starts with middle school and then it overlaps on the 10th. And then that's when we get to the elementary school. So there'll be an overlap on the 10th with both programs being in there. So basically 4 competitions instead of 2. That's allowed us to have a lot more teams. And we'll have over 3,000 teams will be invited to VEX Worlds. And that is the tentative agenda. So everything's maybe subject to change of being tweaked, but the overall dates of your VRC middle school or your IQ elementary school, these are the dates that are going to happen. For the first time ever, we'll be having our RADC, so REC Foundation Area Drones Competition. That's what RADC stands for. We also will have that event, which will overlap IQ Elementary School. And they will check in on the 10th, qualification matches and skills matches on the 11th, and then divisional finals and awards on the 12th. And again, the RADC World Championship will also be at the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Center from May 10th to 12th. So I'm very excited that the REC Foundation has grown to include drones. We were the presenting sponsor for the Bell VRC Challenge this year, and we're supporting other events too. And so for you VEX teams out there that are here at that point, you'll get to see the RADC competition. And for you RADC students that may be listening in, you do get your own event. A little bit from the logistics, right? So to the right, you can see what the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Center looks like from the outside. It is a giant event. It's a really big event. Inside, it's a small arena. The arena's probably about half the size of Freedom Hall in Louisville. It is circular though, and we're going to be able to maximize. And the beauty of having the 4 competitions is we still think most students will be able to see the event live. And this is a volleyball competition to the right down there, just show you some of the massive space. So you're probably saying, Dan, that's pretty ambitious that you guys are going to be overlapping. How are you guys going to do it? So I wanted to share for the first time publicly a little bit of an overview, not a detail, but you can see the arena in the left, the circular arena. And to the left, you see one pit area, and to the right, you see another pit area. And that pit area accommodates all our teams. It's about 640 teams per competition, and that'll be set up on the left. So we'll start out when VRC Middle School and JROTC and VEX-U moves in, they'll come into the one pit area. And then all the competition of divisions are in the center. And as they're competing and having their division finals and stuff like that, VEX High School will be moving into the other pit area. So it'll swap back and forth. And there's plenty of space to walk into the arena in front of the building. There'll be plenty of space, but that's kind of how we're going to pull this off. I thought you guys would be, it'd be interesting for you to see what we plan to do. So it'll be a back and forth. And this is how we can maximize the number of teams that can participate this year. So COVID impact, again, another question that we've been asked a lot about. And like, what's our contingencies? What are your requirements and stuff like that? So since day one, since the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, late February, early March in 2020, our policy has been to focus on the health and safety of our community, but we're not experts in this. We never have been. We don't pretend to be. So we've always been consistent that we will continue to abide by local, state, and national health and safety policies. So how we run an event in California may be different than how we run an event in Arkansas, which may be different than Massachusetts, for example. And even within a state, things are differently. We had an event in an area that required masks and vaccines, and some of the communities like, well, I went to an event 20 miles away that didn't. And again, the local ordinance there was that's what they required. So what's going on in Dallas right now? So Dallas does have an active mask mandate. So right now, all participants and attendees will need to wear a mask during the event. However, we are not requiring a vaccine because it's not required in the city of Dallas or the state of Texas. So we're not going to be looking at vaccine. I'm not going to get here talking about the merits of vaccinations. That's obviously a hot topic. But from our perspective, we're not requiring it because Texas and Dallas doesn't require it. But again, we are being careful, and we'll have a mask mandate. We'll also have plenty of stations to get screened if needed. If you're not feeling well, we'll have tests on site, and we'll have contingency plans for all those different situations. So we do ask that all registered teams understand and abide by the guidelines, and you'll be asked to acknowledge the policy when you register. We will issue a final health and safety policy on March 30th, because we know things are changing all the time. So we will have one final statement. Some key dates right now. If you've qualified by January 31st, you must be registered and paid by March 1st. You'll notice that we really opened up the window of dates this year. It's the faster we have teams registered, the easier it is to plan. But where there's so many uncertainties, we did keep the windows much more open. If you qualify from the 1st to the 28th, you'll have 4 weeks to register, or by March 21st, whichever comes first, and you have to pay by April 6th. And if you qualify on or after March 1st, you'll have 3 weeks, or to March 28th, whatever comes first, and you must pay by April 6th. And you do have the ability to cancel by April 6th. So that's a question that we get asked a lot. If you've registered, please go to vexworlds.com and click on register. You get all the information that you need from that website. Hotel and travel information. We've worked really, really hard with Dallas to make sure we have great hotel options. Most hotel options, you'll be able to walk to Kay Bailey Hutchinson Center. And there are options if you want to be on the outskirts a little bit more, you can take the DART system that's here in Dallas and take the DART to the event. But instead of me going over a lot of things, we do have a housing partner, and we encourage you to book your accommodation through our housing partner, which is Team Travel Source. And the link for their facilities is there. We guarantee you, if you work with Team Travel Source, you're getting that custom experience. They will be able to help you with lost keys and lost in the city and all those type of things. So at the minimum, you're asked to at least check out their rates. We did this our last year in Louisville, and people were really surprised. They're like, oh, we always booked on our own because we thought it was cheaper. And then they went with our partner and actually saved money or got free internet. There's different options available. So once you have registered and you're booking your hotel, please use that link. Dallas is a fun city. We're glad to be back in our home city. We're here in Greenville, Texas. We're less than an hour away to all these great attractions in downtown Dallas, and we're excited to bring it home. One of my favorites is the Perot Museum. Definitely schedule some time. All these are great. There's actually a Pioneer Plaza is right across from the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Center. There's got about 80 full-size steer statues and cowboys and stuff like that. I guarantee a lot of students will be going there and getting selfies and pictures and using social media. It's a cool little place. These are some of the attractions, but again, if you go to the Visit Dallas VEX Worlds site, you'll even get more information. So I think you'll really enjoy what Dallas has to offer. All right, with that, I'm actually running out of steam, so it's perfect. So one of the things that's different about VEX Worlds this year is the hybrid judging model. And then again, we also are going to support LRT. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Lisa.
Hey, Dan, thanks a lot. Again, very excited to be here tonight. Thank you all for having me. I am very excited to talk about the judging model. We get a lot of questions on how teams are going to be judged at VEX Worlds. I think a lot of event partners this year are experiencing the same kind of challenges we are. We have a lot of interested people who want to participate in the judging process and be judges at VEX Worlds, but there are some challenges with traveling there. So with such the uncertainty of this year, we have decided to implement a model that hasn't really been done before at such a large scale for an in-person event. So the first thing is, this is kind of a carryover from last year, but all notebooks for VEX Worlds will be submitted in a digital format. And so this is for the in-person events and also for the LRT events. So it's really important for teams to start really thinking ahead at this point if they're using a paper version of their engineering notebook, to think about how to maybe digitize that so it'll be ready for submission for VEX Worlds. If you're not sure how to do that, please contact your team engagement manager or regional support manager. They can give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. The next thing is how you're going to be judged. So we're kind of going to be separating into two types of judging. So for the in-person events, we're actually going to be utilizing remote judging process, again, just like we did for last year. And again, this allows us to bring in more people from the community to be able to talk to students and interview students. This is going to be conducted in the months of March and April. So if you qualified last year, you'll kind of understand how we did it. But essentially, as soon as you qualify for VEX Worlds, you will be given more instructions on how to sign up for an interview slot for judging. And so this will be done remotely over a Zoom interface. And so you'll be in the sort of same virtual room as your judges, and they'll be interviewing you just like they would in your pits. And so after, this is also going to be done for LRT. At the event, so the in-person event, there will be some follow-up judging in the pit. These will be for certain awards that we need to maybe get a little bit more information on, or if we're having a hard time deciding because there's such great teams, they'll be doing some in-person interviews in the pits, just as a follow-up to some of those awards. The follow-up interviews for LRT will obviously be online. Again, we really want to emphasize that the interviews will be remote, and again on March and April. We are going to be having slots open during the weekdays and on weekends, so we'll have some flexibility in when it's available for your team. More information about this process will be posted on our robot events websites and our roboticseducation.org website in February. We're just finalizing the process. Very happy that we had it all kind of in place last year, and kind of even making it better from some of the stuff that we learned. So we're very excited about that. It will increase our connection with teams. It also give you teams at the event a little bit more time. I know some teams are a little bit stressed about, when the judges are coming by your pits. You don't have to really worry about that this year. You can just spend your time doing skills and qualification matches. So I think that is all the things for judging. And I think the next slide is all about LRT. Yeah, so lots of questions about this. So in our pre-submitted questions, actually over half of them are about LRT at VEX Worlds. So yes, we are bringing LRT back. It's definitely a need again this year. We have heard there are a lot of organizations and students who can't travel to in-person VEX Worlds, even though they really want to. So we are providing this opportunity again. I want to just kind of preface this with when you're thinking about qualifying, it is 2 different events. So there are 2 different processes. I'll kind of go over, there's 2 different ways. The first one is through LRT regional championships. So each event region has the option, if they need to do so, to have an LRT regional championship. Honestly, right now, I looked just the other day in the United States, there are no LRT regional championships. Internationally, we might, they might be posting some up soon, but that's okay. Like we kind of left this option open because we know how things can change quickly, especially with the changing climate. So we just wanted to have this available. Your local region, it really dictates that. So this is where you reach out to your event engagement manager in the United States to kind of learn more about those options. I think right now, like I said, all of them have in-person regional championships set up, but just in case things change, we did have this as an option. Because we don't know how many LRT regional championships will be posted, we can't really assign spots yet. So in the qualifying criteria, we did say we would assign spots in March. And this will be very similar to how we assign spots for regional championships. We look at our capacity, we look at the number of events there are, and then assign spots accordingly. So it's not necessarily an apples to apples, just because your event region has 22 in-person spots does not mean necessarily you're going to have 22 LRT spots. We will do our best to accommodate all teams that can't participate in person and want to do LRT, but I do want to clarify it is a separate qualification spot level. The second way, which we think is the majority of how teams will qualify to LRT, is through invitations based upon 3 criteria. And this is really important because this is where a lot of the questions come up from. I qualified to in-person, but I can't go. And then can I go to LRT? So around the end of March, on March 29th, we are going to be looking at teams who, number 1, have qualified to the 2022 in-person VEX Worlds. That means you still have to qualify. So make sure, to still go to those in-person events, do your best and win those qualifying awards. So you have to have qualified to the in-person. It doesn't mean you're registered. In fact, you shouldn't be registered. So if you've qualified and you can't go to in-person, don't register, but we do have it in our records that you have qualified. If you did register and then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, something has changed in our region and I can no longer travel, then you would contact support@roboticseducation.org and we would let us know that you can't attend, and then we can follow the refund process that's in the qualifying criteria to refund you and take you off the registered team list. But it's very critical that if you can't go, you need to let us know so we can make the accommodation for you. The third thing, and this is really important too, you must be on the official LRT standings as of March 27th. So what this does, if you attended an LRT event, and it's an official REC Foundation LRT event, we do have a new LRT ranking system. If you go to robotevents.com, it's very similar to where you find the world skills standings, you will also find an LRT standings. And so when you participate in an LRT event, the scores is based upon a number of different things. It's in the game manual, but that will then upload to the standing. Essentially what this is doing is ensuring that your team has participated in at least one LRT event. Last year when we hosted the LRT VEX Worlds, the amount of team satisfaction with the LRT experience goes up for every time that you participated in it because you understand how it all works and you make sure you have the right technology. So we wanted to make sure that teams understood the LRT system before going to VEX Worlds, and to do this, this is one way we are going to verify that. That means the people are then going to ask, but so how can I register for an LRT? So you can go onto robotevents.com right now, and there is a filter for event type. And so you would click on LRT or live remote tournaments, and it will show you all the live remote tournaments available. And as of yesterday, there's approximately over 30 LRT events that still have capacity. So, and if you don't find one, reach out to your event engagement manager. We can definitely add some more LRT events. They might not necessarily qualify to your event regional championship, but they would definitely get you on the LRT standings if you needed that. And the date for is not till March 27th. So if you're a team that qualifies at an in-person event the very last weekend, which is the 12th and 13th, you can still participate in an LRT event after that and get yourself on that LRT standings. So again, be sure to meet those 3 criteria. And then on March 29th, we'll be inviting as many teams as we can possibly do that meet that criteria to fill up those LRT divisions. And those will be the LRT divisions will be happening concurrently with the in-person events. So when VRC middle school divisions are going, so will the LRT middle school divisions are going. So it will overlap a little bit on some certain things, but it'll be an exciting time when all of us in person and virtually will be competing together. I think that covers it for most of the LRT questions I have, and I'll pass it back off to you, Dan.
Thank you, Lisa. I guess it's time to talk a little bit about the 2022-23 season. So strap yourself in and slide into this next discussion. So for the first time ever, we're really going to try to, we've always tried to communicate and be clear, but one thing I love about our staff is they're always challenging me and Lisa and things like that. And one of the things they said is, you as the community would sure like to have some dates ahead of time. So, we're always so afraid about giving a date and then not meeting it or something changed and things like that. But we have a pretty good record now of hitting the dates that we planned for. And I thought it was a great opportunity to share these. So the first thing that's coming up is February 4th. A lot of people have asked about signature events. And as you know, signature events is something we introduced 3 years ago as a way to give teams the Worlds experience that maybe don't qualify for Worlds or don't attend a Worlds. So they're kind of like a mini Worlds, and they continue to grow in popularity. Just last week, the Kalahari Classic in Ohio and the SCORE signature event that was in Georgia, also at a water park, were both very, very successful. So we have all kinds of great ones. The one in Indy, we're having one in Green Bay, the Google event in California. So lots of signature events. I know I forgot a few, but more and more people are want to apply and host those. So that application will open up on February 4th. Beginning on March 14th, we will pre-order for the 2022-2023 game element kits. So last year, we really opened up pre-order for these game element kits. And so many people were excited because they shipped when the game was unveiled and people had these game element kits the first week. It was a very successful program. So VEX has agreed to do that again this year. And on March 14th, you'll be able to do the pre-order. And I know this helps you educators too, because you have money that you want to spend this season. And so we're very conscious of that, as well as getting the registration for the season open earlier too. That's something we've really worked to approve. And by April 15th, and we hope to do it maybe even a couple days earlier, but by April 15th, we'll have our season registration open. July 11th through 13 will be our RECF Summit for EP and coaches. It's tentatively a 2-day in-person summit for the EPs. Location TBD, but probably going to be Texas. But that will be an in-person, but we'll also have remote sessions concurrently. So last year it was all remote and we got a lot of positive feedback and we had our highest participation ever. And then we added a coaches session last year too. That'll be remote only. And some more details will come in. So for those of you that really get excited about the EP and Coach Summit, block off July 11th through 13th. March 12th, 2023 will be the final regional state qualifying event. So if you're planning ahead early, that's an important date to know for those states that like to have their championships the last weekend to maximize their season. You'll need to be finished up by March 12th. And most importantly, for a lot of you that are really big planners, because you know that you're going to qualify for the 2023 VEX Robotics World Championship. Those dates will be April 25th through May 4th. Isn't that like May the 4th be with you or something like that? We'll have to celebrate that day, I think. It's again in Dallas, Texas. Tentatively, April 25th through the 29th is when VRC will be. And I did check. AP exams are scheduled to start on May 1st. We've had 3 or 4 pre-submitted questions and even a couple in the chat today about the IB. I went into this in very detail at the last town hall. So I know that those of you that asked the question probably weren't able to attend the last town hall. We really try to work around IB exams when we can. Unfortunately for this year, all our cities, the final 3 cities that were up for hosting VEX Worlds, all had conflicts the last week of April. It forced us to have VEX Worlds in May. We talked to IB about alternative testing dates, which we published, and then we chose to continue with high school when we did, because based on feedback we got from the community, that was the best dates compared to like when calc exams were and science exams and stuff like that. It wasn't an ideal situation. We did know that, but the good news is next year for 2023, the AP exams start on May 1st, and the VRC high school and middle school exams will be, or competitions will be the 25th through the 29th. So IQ will follow April 30th through May 4th. And RADC next year will be a separate event at a separate location. So hopefully those dates will help you with some of your pre-planning. And it just shows we fully anticipate to have our best season ever next year. All right. As you know, I took over as CEO of the REC Foundation in June of 2017. And at the EP Summit, we announced a registration fee increase. And one of the things I learned is that if we do have to announce a registration fee increase, to do it earlier. I think most of you understand why we had to do it. It was for our own sustainability. And we have not had a registration fee increase since that June of 2017. But for 2022, 2023, the initial RECF registration fee will be $200. That's US teams only. So VIQC, VRC, VEXU, and RADC. What's included? 1 team registration, the program welcome kit, access to online challenges, RECF program staff support. I mean, I have to pay these guys, they're incredible. Annual coach and event partner summits, in-person or virtual, and access to education materials and training. And you know, as well as the cost for us to develop these great programs. So we are increasing from $150 to $200 that RECF registration fee. And there'll be a $150 registration fee for additional team. I don't want to go into a lot of details on why we needed to do that. I'm very proud that we've been able to go 5 years, but if you watch the news, you know, costs have gone up. Our number one increase over the years I've been CEO has been healthcare. I think our costs have doubled in that time frame. We've also improved our infrastructure, brought on real IT staffs, marketing, our development staff. We've grown all those organizations. And that costs some money. We've increased some travel to better support events, and we want to continue to invest in. So we did go up $50. But we also knew that we've been listening. There's been requests from a lot of organizations say, hey, I would like to have more teams. I would like to register more teams, but the incremental cost to register these teams prohibits us from doing so. So for the first time ever, I'm very proud to introduce a flat organizational fee. It's $650 for up to 22 team registrations. That's US. Registration fees for non-US teams and organizations are going to be determined by your area RSM. We're working on it actively. So if you're outside the US, we are talking to your RSMs and we'll announce those new fees to you. We didn't want to, you know, we're in over 70 countries. We didn't want to try to list every country, but right now we're announcing the US. So an organization is defined by the location of the hosting school or group. So each school in a district is recognized as a different organization. The team base numbers will not change under this organizational fee. So if an organization exceeds 22 teams, you will have to do additional team registration fees or multiple flat organization fees. I have a couple examples. So that's what we're doing here. So I'm thinking you've quickly done the math. So if you register your first team at $200 and an additional 3 at $150, basically, then you can continue to add teams. So why did we do this? Again, many organizations have said we'd like to add more teams. It gives us a chance to do more league events. We really want to grow it in our school, and would you please consider a flat organizational fee? The REC Foundation and our board were listening, and we're very, very excited to offer this for the first time ever. And we're really, really hopeful that teams, that organizations that are maybe at 2 or 3 will increase that and give even more students the opportunity. And people may ask me, it's like, well, if you didn't have the flat organizational fee, would you have had a different registration fee? The answer is absolutely not. It would have still been $50 increase for teams. I thought some examples would be good. So organization 1, 2, 3, 4 has 1 team, so your registration fee is $200. Organization 9, 8, 7, 6 has 2 teams, so it's $350. 5, 6, 7, 8, 4 teams, it's $650. Now 4, 6, 7, 8 has 22 teams, and it's still $650. And that's kind of demonstrates what this flat organizational fee is. Now organization 3, 3, 3, 4 has 68 teams, so their registration fee is $2,300. So they'll pay 3 flat organization fees to cover 66 teams, and then $350 to cover the 2 remaining teams. So that's how we get to this. So again, what are our initiatives by having the flat organization fee? Again, it is to give those communities that are not registering all their teams a chance to register more teams. And some of the things that we really do want to address that we acknowledge is, with more teams registering, we need more events. That will be a very strategic, important initiative for us, is to continue to grow our event partner network. We love our event partners, they're the backbone of the REC Foundation, but we'll be working to bring in new event partners and work with the event partners that we have to add additional events. We also believe that leagues is a really, really good option. If you have a lot of teams, it's always great to start with league events. LRT is another great option that will help support this growth. You know, I personally, if I was still coaching, I'd probably have my team do an LRT event to start and just get that first robot event out of the way. No travel costs, and that's a good way to do it. But we are going to support what we expect is the increase of teams so much. So the community has asked for this, and we're happy to deliver. And I know there's going to be questions, right? It's such a dramatic shift to what we've done in the past. And my request is, if you have questions how this impacts your organization, please reach out to your team engagement manager or your regional support manager for international teams. They will try to answer your questions. If they can't answer a question, they will escalate the thing. So I know this will be a big discussion topic. And but we're excited about this model to get even more teams into our system, give more students an opportunity to compete. With that, I would like to introduce Grant Cox, who is going to review the VIQC driver rule clarification. That'll be our last presentation item. It's gone a little bit longer than we anticipated, but we're gonna do Q&A afterwards and try to answer as many questions as we can. So Grant.
What's up, everybody? So for those who don't know me, my name is Grant Cox. I'm the chairman of the VEX Game Design Committee, which means that we're the group that, you know, writes the game manuals each year for these games that you all play. So it's been a while since I was on one of these. It's awesome to be here. Wish I was here under better circumstances, but you know, I only get the unfun topics. Last year in 2020, 2021 season, I think I actually came on one of these town halls with Dan, and we talked about how it was going to be the season of flexibility, right? It was the pandemic was hitting, and we were, you know, getting inundated left and right with, you know, schools shutting down teams and, you know, strange circumstances popping up here and there and everywhere. And we really wanted to make sure that teams and events could have an opportunity to play and compete within whatever circumstances existed, right? And so that's where things like LRT came from. It's where things like virtual skills come from, all that great stuff that Dan talked about earlier. IQ hit a particularly interesting snag because teamwork has always been a super core tenet of the VEX IQ challenge. It's always been 2 drivers. You know, I think even the definition of team was written such that you can't have single person teams. It was always a really key thing, and nobody ever really questioned that because teamwork is a great thing to teach. Unfortunately, when the pandemic hit. We started getting lots of feedback that schools were not even allowing any multi-student extracurricular organizations to meet. I mean, sports, chess clubs, robotics teams, whatever. So we made the decision last season to reduce, or to basically make a 1-season exception. At the time, hoped it would be 1 season exception to the 2-driver rule, where we said, you know what, we're going to let 1 driver play for the full match in VEX IQ Challenge. They don't have to do the driver swap. Are they going to have a slight advantage over somebody who has 2 drivers and a controller switch? Possibly. I'll tell you, as a former driver myself, like probably, but we basically made that decision that, you know what, this season is more about giving teams whatever chances they have to compete and less about, the slight advantage they might get from this case. So then April 2021 comes around. Things are going great. If y'all remember, the CDC actually lifted the mask mandates, at one point. We thought it was going to be awesome. And so we released the new manual, no more 1 driver exceptions, no more socially distant driver stations, like everything was great. And then Delta came in and, messed all those plans up for us. And so we were kind of stuck in fall of 2021 to figure out how to manage this situation, right? Where you have, on the one hand, many regions and after school activities that are now adapting to this reality we're in now and saying, okay, we can have multi-student groups, but they have to follow these guidelines and whatnot. But then you have other regions and other areas and other teams that are going back to the old rules, the 2020 rules of, nope, no multi-students. Like we're going to shut your program down if you put 2 students together in a driver box. So the GC kind of had 2 choices, and we kind of didn't do either of them. And I think that was where our mistake happened. So our 2 choices were, A, we could have gone back to last season's rule and just said, you know what, you get to do 1 driver. We understand it's a slight advantage, but that's, health and safety is more important. Or we could have gone the opposite approach, which is require, a form or some sort of health and safety test, or like you must verify that you are not permitted to have 2 drivers in the station. That I hope the teachers that are listening in and administrators are cringing as I say that, because that has lots of privacy concerns and lots of logistical concerns. And so we kind of went both directions at the same time and caused all sorts of confusion. So on the screen there, so you can see in the 2020-21 season, it just said team's discretion, whether they can have 1 driver or 2. Underneath that, the current for this season, we left the actual rule the same and added one of our explanation blue boxes at the bottom to say, listen, this rule is here, it's at your discretion, but like, please be fair. Like, please, try not to exploit it for strategic gain. Like, try to remember the fairness and the core spirit of the competition and whatnot. If you're exploiting this for strategic gain, like it's really not the intent, but we also can't make a hard rule on it. And it's funny because like when I was putting together my talking points for tonight, I realized I was like, that's really what it comes down to. Like we should have just gone one decision or the other. If anybody was around back in the zone days, in the zone, then followed by Turning Point. In the zone, VRC in the zone had this really big issue. I promise this tangent will make sense. In the zone had this really big issue with defense bots that were quote unquote unfair, right? And they were ruining the spirit of the competition and whatnot. And everybody was all up in arms about defense. And then the year after that, we released a game that said, hey, there's a King of the Hill platform. Any amount of defense is allowed. You can flip robots off of it if you want. And people had all sorts of problems with in the zone defense. Nobody had any problems with the Turning Point defense. And I remember talking to a good friend and mentor of mine, Mike Martis, who's been doing robotics almost as long as I've been alive. I looked it up, almost as long as I've been alive. And I said, do you think people are going to freak out about this defense issue? And what he told me was a really good lesson. He said, listen, people understand different approaches to gameplay, different ways you can write rules, as long as it's in the rule. Like, and that was really where the in the zone issue was a big problem, because the rules were not very clear on what defense was allowed or not. Whereas Turning Point, the rules straight up said, this is legal, you can do whatever you want. And I really think that same core issue is what came up here, because the complaints we've been getting this season are not necessarily about teams freaking out because their students are next to other students and breaking health guidelines. The complaints we've been getting are, hey, I saw a team who brought 5 students to the competition. They're all eating pizza together in their pits, but then only sending 1 driver to the match. Like, is that not allowed? And then that team says, it doesn't say it's not allowed, like it was kind of stuck in the middle. So we're going back to the other side of the spectrum, and we're going to say, if you're bringing 5 kids to the competition and they're all eating pizza together in the pits, you have no excuse not to send 2 students to the driver's station. So Dan, can you go to the next slide? So we responded to this on a Q&A post a week or 2 ago, but it's going to be in next week's game manual update. This is the best way we could come up with putting it into words without doing some sort of, you have to prove to us, via registry that, you can't have the safety or you can't have 2 drivers. Basically, we're adding a line to the rule itself that says, taking advantage of this exception for strategic gain is, no questions asked, a violation of this rule, and extreme cases might be considered a code of conduct violation. That was basically the justification that a lot of people were giving in up until this point, saying, hey, the rule says maybe please everybody hug and don't do it, but it doesn't say we absolutely can't do it. Well, now the rule says you absolutely can't do it. And then in the blue box, we added some specific examples to say, like, again, we're not going to mandate, have people at your event going to each pit and counting how many students are in the pits. But like, you definitely get the idea of what is trying to be communicated here. We're trying to basically say, there is no justification for having 1 student in the driver's station unless you are operating under strange conditions that are outside of your control, and you can only have a 1-student team, and your school is going to pull all your funding if you put 2 students in the driver's station together. It's unfortunate that we had to get to this point. I really, we at the GDC, we talked a lot about this rule when we first brought it back in the fall, and there was definitely people on the GDC who said, we need to be harder, heavier handed on this. And I think I was really hoping that the spirit of the competition would prevail, but it did not. So all the Pinewood Derby dads out there, you ruined it for the rest of us. So just to be clear, I guess the simpler way to think of it is, a switch from 2 drivers to 1, like a programmatic switch to single person IQ teams is not a direction that the IQ challenge is going to be going ever. The only reason we did the one was for this very, very special case. So hopefully that rant gets the idea across without being too rough. I apologize if I offended any Pinewood Derby dads out there, but you get the idea. So I think that was all I had on that. I have some other, there's plenty of Q&As having to do with game questions and whatnot, but I think we'll get to that in the Q&A section. Dan, you want to take it away for any remaining slides?
Absolutely. So now we're the part where I'm guessing most of you tuned into, right? Is you want to hear the Q&As, right? And as I said at the opening remarks, it was truly interesting this year. I actually had a couple conversations with Grant and Lisa that so many of the questions were focused on a couple topics, and by far LRT and the agenda for VEX Worlds were the 2 that we were asked the most. But we did get, and Lisa, Grant, and I all tried to answer as many questions as we could in our presentation, but there are a few that just didn't fit in. So we're going to use this next 30 minutes and to answer as many of these questions as possible. So I'll go first. I like this question. It actually came from my friend Foster, legendary coach, mentor, event partner in Delaware, but he wanted to know the status of the Student Advisory Board. And I know some of the students from the Student Advisory Board are actually tuned in today. And so we launched this in 2019 to try to do a better job of getting input from the students. And they've been very, very valuable asset, especially like on game questions. They'll ask Grant saying, hey, can you clarify this and stuff like that. But to answer Foster's question in particular, this is what they've been working on for myself and for the REC Foundation this past season. So probably my #1 goal for them, and they will tell you this, and they'll they'll chuckle. But I really want to know, how do we communicate better? Virtual skills is a good example. I thought because it was included in registration, every coach out there must know about it. And it turns out the number one reason we're getting from teachers not doing it is they didn't know about it, right? So they are really working with us on how we can more effectively communicate to our community, and particularly coaches and event partners. And they've offered us some suggestions. You may have even seen some subtle changes in the last email blast. So the REC Foundation has the best marketing department in the world, in my opinion. And they do incredible jobs with our email blasts, and we want to get the information out there, and we want to make sure that the coaches and event partners are able to get the information and open it up. So we're really focused on that, and that is an area that they've really been helping with. They've also given us some very good feedback on our website. So we are going to transform our website. And we're getting feedback for them. I think one of my favorite topics was the engineering notebook rubric. They asked a lot of questions about physical versus digital notebooks, gave some suggestions on how it can be rolled out better. The Girl Powered initiative, they were surprising. You know, that's one of our very favorite initiatives. Some very pointed feedback from both the women and men in our organization on that and how we can be more effective. We went over VEX Go in 1, 2, 3 with them, and they asked them to help get the words out. And a lot of feedback on LRT and LRS. I'll be honest with you, LRS wasn't something we were going to as actively promote, but they really felt that LRS had a place, especially for new teams and organizations. Online challenges, they actually came up with an online challenge, which I did not release this year. I know they want me to in the future. And we have it, but they actually, you know, some of those things that some of our community really embraces online challenges, some don't, and they gave us some really valuable feedback so that we can improve our offerings. And I think you can see that this year. We added a lot of new online challenges this year, and some of that feedback came directly from the Student Advisory Board. And we talk about things like VEX Worlds and Game Unveil and stuff like that. So we meet once a month, and I give them homework assignments. Carol from our organization actually is the lead for Student Advisory Board. One of the other questions I was asked is, hey, you didn't open up for new applicants this year. And we did have a little bit of turnover. So we had grown to 12 Student Advisory Board members. We had 2 decide that with their college studies, they could no longer participate. But instead of opening it up, because it's a really, really exhaustive process, we actually just reached out to 2 of our finalists from the year before and asked if they would be interested, and that's how we filled those spots. But this coming year, we will open it up again. So you coaches and students listening will have an opportunity. And again, the Student Advisory Board represents multiple countries. I think of the 12, 5 are from different countries. We have multiple genders, backgrounds, small teams, students that have lots and lots of experience, some that's their second year, and we really try to get a reference. So Foster, thanks for that question. That was a really good one. So I'm very proud of the Student Advisory Board, and I can't wait to feature them at VEX Worlds a little bit. So, and I told them if they behave themselves, I'm gonna buy them each a McDonald's Happy Meal. That's how much I care for them. All right, a question for you, Grant. Lots of good questions coming in. OneDrive Teams, we've already answered those. Here we go. Here's a new one. Could changes be made that could allow head refs to use video in making determination of rule violations? I didn't start you out slow, did I, Grant? I threw you a hard one, right?
I don't get any softball questions. I promise
I'll give you a softball one.
I am jealous though. You've never offered to get me a Happy Meal, so I am jealous about that. So let's talk about video replay. This could have its own half-hour segment. So the question, you know, so we get asked this question really often, extremely often, and it's a tough question to talk about because video replay would have benefits, some benefits, right? I can't sit here and pretend that it would not have some benefits, right? And so it's definitely one of those things that we look at every year. Unlike one driver IQ teams. This is something that we look at every year, trying to figure out, has technology reached that point yet? Is the program reached that point yet? And we just haven't reached the point yet where we think we can figure out a way to do this feasibly, that works in the VEX ecosystem. And by that, I don't mean technology wise. Obviously, events are live streaming now. Anybody can rewind a Twitch stream or whatever. Like, it's much more about the resources that come into play at an event who tries to do video replay. A lot of people always point to things like, professional sports using, video replay or technology or whatnot. And like, man, if you knew how much money the NFL spent on their camera system, and, the tennis, a lot of times they have those like line cameras and stuff like that. I mean, it is extremely intense technology that they use in order to capture every angle, and they still can't capture every angle. There's football plays I'm not a sports fan, but I'm told that every game there's plays that they can't really decide based on the video, and they have to go with the call that was on the field. I'm telling you that, like, and we tried it this year. We tried it at the LRT Worlds last year. Because we were like, hey, there is a live stream. We have staff that can sit in a room with no windows in it and, go and review matches. And so we had some experience trying it, and you'd be surprised how much you don't see on video, right? Like the most common, well, because there was no head-to-head interactions in LRT, the most common requests were scoring requests, right? And there's a lot of times where even on the video, it's like, well, in this frame, it looks like the ball is in this spot. And in this frame, it looks like the ball is in this spot. And which frame matters? If you're getting to that point, you're kind of missing the point of the competition, right? And that's kind of the final gist I want to say is, I hate the phrase, part of the challenge, or I forget the phrase that first used to use, but there's some, there's a phrase like it's part of the challenge. It is a human judged, human refereed, human driven competition, right? They are robots. There is an out-time period, but our field doesn't have sensors that score for you. The robots don't all have specific position location sensors that can detect exactly where they are relative to a line or whatnot. It's a human who's judging it. So we're much more like baseball than we are like the NFL, right? In baseball, you have a strike zone. The umpire does what they can to call, the strike zone as consistently as they can. But if they had to pause and review a video after every single strike, the baseball games would take even longer than they already do. I'm not a big baseball fan, so I could go longer than that. But you get the point. It's part of the challenge, a human challenge. And so when I was a driver, I mentioned that already. I also coach now. One of the things we always instill is the quote win anyways, right? Like if you're doing strategies or you have these edge case scenarios that you're relying on a frame perfect millisecond precise call, you're kind of missing part of the strategy, right? I don't know. I could go a million different directions with this question. But those are kind of the big highlights. There's not enough time in events to do it. It won't solve the problems you think it will solve, and it takes away a part of the challenge or something that we don't mind being a part of the challenge. I'll put it that way.
Thanks, Grant. Yeah, that is always a very difficult subject, a difficult question. We get asked that a lot. And I mean, we'd like to have the perfect competition. Don't get us wrong, but for the reasons that Grant said, it's just something that's not feasible in our program, at least right now. Lisa, for you, are there any tournaments being postponed or canceled because of COVID?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So, before the holiday break, it did feel like, hey, everything's going back to normal. And then after the holidays, we heard a huge number of events due to the Omicron variant having to be postponed and canceled. So yeah, I would say it's very regionally specific in terms of how much this is happening, but we are hearing that, and we are trying to work with those EPs to postpone them maybe to a later date, or like Dan mentioned earlier, maybe convert something in person to something virtual like LRT. So I would encourage, if you are in an event that got canceled or postponed or can't compete anymore in person, again, reach out to your event engagement manager and see what LRT options are available, or do maybe a smaller in-person skills only event. If you can maybe compete within your own school district, but maybe can't go outside of it. There are other options to maybe consider. The other question we kind of get is, because things are getting canceled or postponed, is there a chance we're going to postpone the last qualifying weekend of March 12th and 13th? Unfortunately, the answer is no to that. We can't change that because of the VEX Worlds planning that we have to stay on schedule with. But I would really encourage you. I know of some other states that I've helped support in the past. They have done a lot of events that don't actually qualify to a regional championship after that date. I know that there's a really big carrot of oh yes, we need to qualify for the regional championship or VEX Worlds. But I went to a lot of, I don't know, off season, I don't know the right term for it, but non-qualifying events, just to have fun, just to get that extra opportunity to test my robot design, to drive, maybe test on new drivers. Any EP can actually host an event outside of the qualifying season and still have that great experience for students. And so again, if you're fearful of not getting the number of opportunities that you would like to compete this year, please reach out to us. We do have some other opportunities that we can maybe, be creative with. We're trying to think outside of the box to help out all those teams and the teachers out there. And then one last one, just to add on to this, because they all kind of flow together. Are the state championships virtual or in person? And that, again, it goes back to your specific region. Everything is really dependent on how that region, what challenges they're facing and what ways that they want to run their regional championships. So reach out to your event engagement manager to find out what that status is. And like I said, there might be some last minute pivoting because of the recent challenges that we're facing globally. Okay, Dan, I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right, I'm thinking I'm going to give myself a softball question. Does that seem fair? Here is a good one that came to me. Will VEX Worlds allow spectators? Absolutely. One thing we pride ourselves is all our competitions are open to spectators, but again, we've had, because of local state registrations or regulations, we have had some events this year that didn't have spectators, right? But VEX Worlds right now will be open to spectators, but if there's a mask mandate, we'll require that the spectators wear their mask. So hopefully that answered that one. Here's another one. Is it possible to schedule Worlds VRC high school matches over the week dates due to testing season? I think I hopefully answered that in the presentation, that next year for VEX Worlds, it will predate the IB, but just by the nature of how we run our events, it's not a 2-day event. It will always be at least 3 days for each program. So we wouldn't be able to do it just on it. And plus it costs, there's a lot that goes into selecting a site, and it's a very, very big expense, honestly, to rent a site. We get a lot of support from the states and cities that have hosted it, but the way to make everything fit was we try to consolidate it into a 10-day window, right? And remember, we have 2 days to move in and set up and 2 days to tear down and set out. So by the nature, we would never be able to, I should say never, but it's not likely we would ever be able to just schedule high school over the weekend. So good question. Grant, this has been asked both in a pre-submitted question as well as a live question here tonight. But why can't we bring back EDR parts? Why can't we use those this season at VEX Worlds? So again, another nice hard question for you.
Yeah, you chose the most challenging way to phrase it too. There are easier ways to phrase it. So the overarching theme, so this question gets asked a bunch of different ways. And the reality that just people aren't clamoring for Cortexes to be legal. What they're really, curious about or asking about is, hey, there are part shortages, there are electronic shortages. Like how can we address this? How can we make more teams have more access to materials, right? one of the proposed options is bringing back Cortex. So this is another really challenging situation. This is a tough one that we spend a lot of time discussing. I'll answer it with a couple different prongs. One, there's several people who asked in the live Q&A, hey, when will X be available? When will Y be available? The REC, the GDC, that's not really we don't really know. It's not really our place. It's I will tell you, during my time at VEX as director of sales there, if something's out of stock, I can assure you they're doing everything they can to move mountains and bring it in. And I know you hear that a lot. Those of you who've been around since V5 rolled out, you've heard me say that a lot probably, but I mean, it really is. And please trust that they're doing what they can. If there's a specific part or a specific electronic that you're looking for, hit up the sales line, the customer support line. They can usually provide a rough ETA of that particular item. But I mean, as Dan mentioned, you see the news, right? Like supply chain shortages are a reality, not just in our program, but in other robotics programs and in other real world situations, right? So that's the second tenet or second prong that I want to approach this question with is, if you're a competition team and your design relies on, I don't know, like a specific type of intake wheel or something that is temporarily out of stock, that type of thing is happening in the real world right now. My father used to work for Chrysler. He was one of the leads on the Jeep Wagoneer project, which if you haven't seen the ads, it's their new top of the line Jeep. It was supposed to come out 2 years ago or something like that, and they literally couldn't because the electronics were late and whatnot. That might not be true, but about the date, but you get the idea. That's a real design challenge that real engineers are dealing with, throughout the country, throughout the world. And so rather than freaking out, or your team, your students, rather than letting them freak out about a particular part being missing, it is an unfortunate reality. It's not fun, but it's an unfortunate reality that real engineers have to deal with every day. How do you find alternate sources? How do you find other design solutions and whatnot? So that's the second thing. Related to that one, 3D printed parts. Please see my previous town halls or my posts on the forum or so on and so forth about why we can't allow 3D printing. We're running out of time here, so I won't go into the details on that, but we have no intentions of opening the doors to 3D printing this season or in the near future. So yes, even though bearings, blocks, or whatever could be easily replaced with 3D printed parts, that's not something that we'll be doing. And then save the best for last, the Cortex question. So the Cortex question is a tough one. We have made a couple case-by-case, or at least we've talked about making case-by-case exceptions for really extreme circumstances. Nobody's actually taken advantage of them. One of the extreme circumstances we talked about doing was teams who have access to the beta kits. V5 beta hardware, has always been illegal. So a couple of people reached out to us and said, hey, if I do have beta hardware, could I potentially use it? The answer to that is maybe. We might be able to talk about a case-by-case scenario there. There's somebody in the live Q&A asking about teams in Uganda who don't have access to V5. Yeah, I mean, that's the type of extreme case that I wasn't familiar with the fact that the Ugandan teams didn't have access to V5. So feel free to reach out to us, gdc@vex.com or the various REC support emails, to work through these case-by-case scenarios. Program-wide though, I just don't think we're going to be able to open it back up to Cortex for all the reasons why we closed it off to Cortex in the first place. In addition to, there's a number of different reasons. They all just smashed into each other in my head as I started to talk. But one of the big ones is kind of like I talked about with video replay. It might not solve the problems that you think it's going to solve. Yeah, you might be able to put together a clawbot using 393 motors to get demolished out there by a V5 robot, to the point where, it will not be a good experience for your students, especially this year's game. It's a brutal game. And so there's that. There's also, if Cortex stuff isn't in stock as much either, it's not, just because there's the support isn't quite there for Cortex anymore. The VEX code stuff isn't there for Cortex, all the the troubleshooting flow charts are out of date. You know, it's a legacy system. And I don't say all those things to bash the Cortex or whatnot. Like, technology changes and moves on, right? And so unfortunately, that's not something we're going to be able to open back up for this season. But if you do have extreme cases, like you are in a remote nation with no V5s within 500-mile radius, you know, let us know, please. So yeah, I think that's that one. Yeah.
All right, let's throw it back to Lisa. But before I do, to that point, if you're in a really tough situation and you can't get V5 equipment, you only have Cortex, please reach out to your team engagement manager and we'll try to help, right? No promises. I want to be clear, no promises, but we do have connections to other organizations that may be willing to lend some stuff and things like that. So we want everybody to participate that can. Lisa, 2 questions for you. First one is, when will the online challenge winners be announced?
Okay, so this is really exciting. This year, again, we offered another suite of online challenges. We had a lot of teams participate, and I'm sure they're now anxiously awaiting the results. So I did want to share the finalists will be announced on February 9th, and then the winners will be announced on the 23rd. So we're really excited to see some of those winners, and some of those will actually qualify to VEX Worlds. So that's exciting as well. I have a second question that I saw in the chat. I was going to answer real quick, Dan. I don't know. It might be the same question you're going to ask, so we'll see if our minds are thinking alike. But it goes back to LRT. And someone had a question about, you know, they've been participating in in-person events all year. They go to their in-person state championship, and then right at the last minute, they find out they can't go and they haven't participated in LRT. So this is why we are trying to communicate this as early as possible. If you think there's any chance for you to need to use the LRT option at VEX Worlds, please plan on participating in LRT event now. There will be a couple weeks after that last qualifying event to participate in one, but you know that those events are going to be filling up fast. This year, we are 100% utilizing the event partners in our communities to host LRT events. So if you are an event partner and you're looking for a way to, to host an LRT event, those last 2 weekends are probably going to be pretty high demand. But yeah, so all the EPs in our community are the ones that are going to be hosting these events. So again, if you think there's a chance, do one now. They're a lot of fun anyways, and that'll make sure that you are on the LRT ranking. Dan, was there another one you want me to answer?
No, actually, you read my mind. It's LRT. I really am excited as how many LRT questions we got, because I'm going to answer another LRT question. Is this something that we just did last year and for this year, or is it going to be something we continue to offer? So I actually had a slide on this at the last town hall. But we fundamentally believe that LRT is now a core program for us. There's multiple reasons. I had them outlined before, but I think obviously it helps us with like rural America. We have teams in some of the most remote parts of the United States as well as the world, and they just really don't get a chance to travel to events, or they may go to just their state championship. And we think LRT is a great tool for these organizations, these teams, to still compete and iterate and their robot design, right? So we think that's one. The other one is not as obvious. So we actually think in places where there's lots and lots of teams and lots of events, we think that's also a tool. I always talk about Indiana. It's one of our top 3 states for registered teams. They have a huge density of IQ, and a lot of times there just isn't enough events for all the IQ teams. And I think LRT is a great solution for them too. We have some very good strategic initiatives in Central America and Africa. And for the first time, a lot of these countries are now able to compete. So when I talked about over 50 countries, I'm not even including a dozen Africa countries that technically haven't registered, but are competing this year, and LRT is a tool for them, right? And so we believe, and there's other uses for LRT. One of them is the fun one. I always pick on my good friends in Singapore. Everybody wants to play with Singapore. They always have incredible programs there, and LRT is a great way to set up an LRT event. I was in some LRT events last year that had 7 or 8 different countries, and it's just another tool for to kind of shrink the world through robotics, right? So it's definitely staying. Lisa runs that program. It's one of the many things she does. And I want to make sure that next year going into the season that we've trained our event partners and educated the community to talk about this option. Because again, right now it's a great solution. We had another question, I think, what can I do with my students? We don't think they're going to qualify for even their regional championship, definitely not worlds. You know, LRT has practice sessions and things like that. So that's an option. It's all part of the design process. Grant. I am, oops, too early. We got about time. That was dumb. Each of us will do one more question. So Grant, for you, here's an easy one for you, a softball question. Are you going to dye your hair for VEX Worlds? And a more strategic question is, as an IQ event partner, what, if anything, should we do to enforce G8B?
No, I never dye my hair. I temporarily spray color onto it. Although I might dye it. So I always want to. Can you go back to the slide that shows what the new G8 rule says? This is a really good question. I'm glad this question got asked because I should have talked about it during my bit, and I did not. I don't know if you can do that. Maybe you can't. But basically, I don't want to break anything. So basically, the situation with the new version of G8 is basically should be handled similarly to how you would handle something like a code of conduct concern or a non-student centered concern. Again, my favorite example being if you see a team with 5 students in the pits eating pizza and then they send one driver out to the match, it always starts with a conversation, you know, with that coach, or, you know, hey, like, are you aware that this rule is a rule now? You know, we're observing some behavior that we don't think is in line with the spirit of this rule or whatnot. If it gets confrontational, or if, you know, if it escalates beyond that, the number one resources go straight to your event engagement manager at the REC. Again, just like you would for a code of conduct violation. It's not necessarily your burden to, you know, go the full escalation and investigation and you know, knockout brawl in the event itself, right? But rest assured that there is an investigation process that the REC will go through and address accordingly. Lisa, I don't know if you want to talk any more about that, or if that basically sums it up.
No, great. You captured it perfectly. Again, we're just really relying on our community to follow the spirit of this game. And, you know, this is all about the kids and having fun with robots. So we're hoping that everyone, you know, kind of tunes into that mission.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Lisa, final question for you too. Are you going to dye your hair for VEX Worlds? That was an internal question. And then also,
yes,
is the World Championship, is it mandatory to participate in robot skills? That came from Paraguay. So we actually have 10 different countries at least that are participating tonight. That's really exciting.
That is exciting. I haven't thought about dyeing my hair, but, you know, maybe I'll do that. We'll see. So robot skills. So just like at a regular qualifying event and at VEX Worlds, it is not required. It is optional. And so, you know, teams have that opportunity. It's going to actually, I know when Dan showed the layout, it didn't actually show the skills fields because it's actually on a different floor of its own level. So we got lots of skills fields this year, but it's not required. It's highly encouraged. I mean, a lot of our judged awards do look at robot skill scores. It's another way to show off your robot's abilities. So it is optional. It will have, again, the opportunity to do up to 3 driver and 3 programming skills runs at VEX Worlds. Thanks, Dan.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Grant. Before I answer my final questions, I first want to thank our marketing team led by Ruby and Amelia. That entire team worked tirelessly the last 2 days to put these slides together, and a big kudos. I know that Lisa and I in particular were really grateful. We just gave them text and they made it look good. So thank you, marketing team. You guys knocked it out of the park. And of course, to our production team that's here. Honestly, Lisa and I could probably, and excuse me, Grant could stay here all night answering questions. But we have people that are making this work behind the scenes. Bill, Ruben, Stuart, and Daniel. I'm probably forgetting somebody, but I know they're here, and they've been in here since before 8 this morning, and we want to be able to let them get home. So big thank you to them. And then finally, thank you to the community. We had almost 250 people live. We always know we have more people. A lot of you submitted questions, and if we didn't answer your question tonight, we may have sent it directly to your team engagement manager, event engagement manager, or regional support manager to answer those questions directly. But we tried to answer as many as possible. For the Q&A, man, no matter how much time we plan, there's some great ones that have come in. We've tried to answer as many as possible. We do have them saved, and we'll try to include the answers to those questions in future correspondence. So with that, I will answer the last 2 questions of the evening. First one, I think it's really important. This is not an easy one, so I didn't want to just have Lisa and Grant have all the hard ones. Since we had another COVID surge, can we push back the qualifier date until the end of March? And that is actually a question that I ask my staff. I mean, Lisa will nod her head, Jim Crane, Mike Martis, they would all nod their heads. I ask that question too every single year. But planning VEX Worlds is really, really hard. It's a lot of big effort. And one of the things we need to do is have firm information on the teams that are qualifying and then are registering, because there's a lot of planning once we get that information. This year with remote judging, it's even more important to have that date so that we give our judges plenty of time to give the teams the best experience possible. Last year, we only judged for live remote skills. This year, every team, whether they're doing LRT or in-person worlds, are going to be judged, and that takes a lot of time, a lot of volunteers. So we need that full window to plan, to make sure we're ready to go, to pull teams from the wait list if necessary. So while I do sympathize, believe me, I really do. I wish we could have a regular season until 2 weeks before Worlds, but unfortunately, my team tells me that that's not possible, and I try to listen to my team as much as possible. So, so I understand the sentiment, but it's just not something we're able to do. And then finally, this one came from China. So thank you, Google Translate, for helping me. But it's basically asking about the online competition. Why does it take so long to release them? Because it really helps their teams to stay productive. And I'm not sure if they meant online challenges or if they meant like the referee videos or something like that. But we're always striving to get everything done out earlier. I assure you, Grant and Lisa will nod their heads, is that we want to get the referee videos out earlier. We know that online challenges are used by our international community, and that many of you are actually in class, during Game Unveil, that your education seasons are different than they are in the US and North America. So we are always working to improve the dates and get that information out earlier. And so there's never a perfect world. One of the things with, like, for example, the referee videos and the season guides and stuff like that, is a lot of times after we release the game, we want immediate feedback, right? So we talk to our staff and some teams and things like that, and see what we need to clarify. So we're doing our best to improve the dates and give you a longer time to compete and do online challenges. So with that, again, thanks for being such a great community. As always, I encourage you to reach out to your direct staff people to answer more questions. And we look forward to having another webinar town hall coming up. And more importantly, I wish you really big success at your local, state, regional, and national championships. And I hope to see many of you at VEX Worlds in May of 2022. So with that, good night and thank you.